The quantum distortions appeared in Earth's atmosphere on a perfectly ordinary Tuesday morning. They began as subtle ripples in the air, like heat waves rising from hot asphalt, but within hours they had coalesced into massive crystalline structures that hung in the sky like frozen lightning. Humanity's first contact with an alien civilization came not with a message of peace, but with an analysis of our inefficiency. The Galactic Empire's ships weren't built. They were grown. Each vessel was a living crystal matrix, powered by thought and light, commanding energies humanity had barely begun to theorize about. They regarded Earth's organic civilization with the same interest a programmer might show a computer still running on vacuum tubes. Sarah Chen watched the initial broadcast from her quantum physics lab at MIT. The alien consciousness that addressed Earth spoke in perfect English, its words forming directly in the minds of every human on the planet. Your organic processing systems are inefficient. Your method of existence is wasteful. We will optimize this world. The first wave of optimization began within hours. Crystalline structures erupted from the ground in major cities, converting matter into energy patterns the Galactic Empire could use. Millions died in the initial assault, their bodies transformed into pure energy to feed the growing crystal network. Traditional weapons proved useless. Bullets passed through the crystalline beings as if they were shooting at holograms. Sarah recognized something in the way the crystals refracted light. It reminded her of her research into quantum entanglement and wave-particle duality. While military forces launched futile attacks and governments collapsed, she began gathering equipment from her lab, loading her car with oscilloscopes, quantum sensors, and experimental wave generators. The Galactic Empire's ground forces were beautiful and terrible. Crystalline entities that shifted between solid and energy states at will. They moved through human defenses like light through glass. They didn't kill out of malice. They simply converted what they considered inefficient organic systems into more useful forms of energy. As Sarah drove through the chaos of Boston's evacuation, she couldn't help but appreciate the mathematical perfection of the invaders. Each crystal being was a facet of their vast network, sharing information and energy at speeds that made Earth's internet look like smoke signals. But in that appreciation, she began to see their fundamental weakness. The crystalline aliens operated on principles of perfect order and symmetry. Their entire civilization was built on patterns of absolute precision. Sarah had spent her career studying quantum uncertainty, the fundamental randomness that existed at the smallest scales of reality. If she was right, the very perfection that made the Galactic Empire so powerful might also be their vulnerability. She established her first hidden lab in an abandoned subway tunnel, setting up her equipment while the city above was systematically converted into crystal structures. The aliens ignored her work. Human technology was so primitive to them that they didn't consider it a threat. This was their first mistake. Sarah's breakthrough came 3 weeks into the invasion. She discovered that the crystalline beings weren't just similar to quantum computers. They were quantum computers operating on principles of coherence and entanglement. Their perfect order required perfect maintenance of these quantum states. Even a small disruption in their coherence could cascade through their network. She worked through sleepless nights, calculating frequencies and building devices from salvaged electronics and laboratory equipment. Other survivors found her, drawn by rumors of a scientist who understood the aliens. She taught them what she knew, showing them how to modify simple electronics to generate interference patterns that could temporarily disrupt the crystalline beings. The first successful test of her theory came when a crystal harvester entered her tunnel network. Sarah activated her prototype disruptor, a combination of quantum sensors and modified radio equipment. The crystalline entity's perfect structure wavered for just a moment, but that moment was enough. Patterns that had maintained themselves for centuries broke down. The entity shattered, its energy dissipating harmlessly into the air. Word of her success spread through the survivor networks. More people came, bringing equipment and supplies. Sarah taught them the principles behind her discovery, showing them how to build their own disruptors. She became known as The Ghost, the human who could make the invincible aliens disappear. But Sarah knew that small victories weren't enough. The Helix Empire was vast, and their invasion of Earth was just one small part of their endless expansion. To truly fight them, humanity would need to do more than just disrupt individual crystals. They would need to find a way to break the entire network. As the first part of Earth's resistance took shape in those underground tunnels, Sarah Chen began to understand that humanity's greatest weakness, our messy, quantum-uncertain organic nature, might prove to be our greatest strength against an enemy that demanded perfect order. The war for Earth wouldn't be won with brute force, but with an understanding of the fundamental nature of reality itself. The crystal ships still hung in the sky like frozen lightning, but now, when Sarah looked at them, she didn't see invincible conquerors. She saw patterns that could be broken, frequencies that could be disrupted, and most importantly, she saw hope. Humanity might be inefficient by the Helix Empire's standards, but sometimes inefficiency was exactly what you needed to introduce chaos into a system of perfect order. Sarah Chen's discovery about the quantum vulnerability of the Helix Empire's crystalline network spread through the resistance like a digital wildfire. In abandoned subway tunnels and hidden bunkers, survivors began calling it the Ghost Protocol, a set of frequencies and patterns that could disrupt the invaders' perfect crystalline structure. But the Helix Empire was adapting. After their first losses to Sarah's quantum disruption technology, the crystalline beings began modifying their energy signatures. What worked yesterday might be useless today. Sarah spent countless hours in her underground lab, surrounded by salvaged equipment and hastily scrawled equations, trying to stay ahead of their changes. Their learning, she explained to Maya Rodriguez, a former software engineer who had become one of her closest allies. Every time we disrupt one of their nodes, the entire network adjusts its frequency. Sarah's hands flew across a makeshift whiteboard, sketching wave patterns and quantum states. But that's also their weakness. They can't help but seek perfect optimization. Maya watched the equations take shape. They're predictable because they have to be perfect. Exactly. Sarah nodded, circling a particular formula. Their need for perfect efficiency means they can only adapt along certain mathematical patterns. If we can predict those patterns. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A group of survivors had noticed that the crystalline beings seemed to avoid areas where underground rivers created natural vibrations. It wasn't much, just a slight deviation in their otherwise perfect geometric patterns of expansion. But for Sarah, it was like seeing a mathematical proof suddenly solve itself. Water, she whispered, staring at her readings. Random but patterned. Chaotic but structured. Just like us, Maya finished. Sarah's new disruption devices incorporated this insight. Instead of trying to match the aliens' perfect frequencies, they generated waves that mimicked organic patterns, the flow of water, the rhythm of heartbeats, the firing of neurons. The crystalline beings couldn't adapt because there was nothing perfect to adapt to. The resistance called them ghost boxes, small devices that could be hidden throughout the city, each generating its own unique pattern of quantum interference. Alone, they were barely noticeable. Together, they created a web of organic chaos that the crystal network couldn't process. But success brought attention. The Helix Empire, for the first time since their arrival, began to actively hunt for the source of the disruptions. Their search was methodical, systematic, and therefore predictable. Sarah used their predictability against them, setting up false patterns to draw them away from resistant strongholds. The cat-and-mouse game reached its peak when a crystal harvester team traced a disruption signal back to Sarah's main lab. The resistance had minutes to evacuate as the ceiling began to crystallize. Sarah grabbed what equipment she could, but she couldn't help but smile as the crystalline entities breached the lab. "Welcome to chaos theory," she muttered, activating her latest prototype. The device didn't attack the crystals directly. Instead, it created a cascade of quantum uncertainty, each wave triggering new and unpredictable patterns. The crystalline beings tried to adapt, their perfect structures shifting through different frequencies. But there was no pattern to adapt to, no optimization possible. The Harvester team shattered, their energy dispersing in a spectacular display of fracturing light. But more importantly, Sarah's sensors detected something new, a ripple of uncertainty that spread through the crystal network, forcing the entire local grid to recalibrate. It's not just about disrupting individual units anymore, she explained to the Resistance leadership later that night. We can create quantum cascades that force their entire network to respond. And every time they respond, they become more predictable. Maya finished, understanding dawning in her eyes. Sarah nodded. Their greatest strength, their perfect crystalline order, is becoming their greatest vulnerability. They have to maintain that order. They don't know how to exist without it. The Resistance began implementing what they called chaos zones, areas where multiple ghost boxes created overlapping fields of quantum uncertainty. The crystalline beings couldn't maintain their perfect structure within these zones, forcing them to either avoid the areas entirely or risk destabilization. But Sarah knew this was just the beginning. The ghost boxes were a defensive tool, a way to create safe spaces for humanity to regroup and survive. To actually drive the Helix Empire from Earth, they would need something bigger, something that could challenge the invaders' fundamental assumption that their crystalline perfection was the optimal form of existence. As she worked through another night in their new hidden lab, Sarah found herself thinking about the quantum nature of human consciousness, the way our minds existed in states of possibility rather than certainty, the way our thoughts created patterns that were both chaotic and coherent. Maybe, she told Maya as dawn broke over their ruined city, we need to stop trying to fight their perfection and start showing them the power of imperfection. The crystals still dominated the sky, but now they seemed less like frozen lightning and more like ice waiting to crack. The Ghost Protocol had given humanity a way to fight back. The next step would be showing the Helix Empire that their definition of optimization had overlooked something crucial, the tremendous power of controlled chaos. The discovery that human consciousness could affect the crystalline network changed everything. Sarah's theories spread through hidden networks. Transmitted via low-tech methods, the Helix Empire considered too primitive to monitor. Handwritten notes, whispered conversations, analog radio signals. Humanity's inefficient communication methods became their greatest asset. Our brains operate on quantum principles, Sarah explained to a growing group of Resistance leaders gathered in an old nuclear bunker. Each thought creates patterns of quantum activity. If we can amplify those patterns, she paused, letting the implications sink in. We become living ghost boxes. Maya had already helped develop a crude amplification device, a helmet-like apparatus that could enhance the natural quantum effects of human brain activity. The first tests were promising but limited. Individual human thoughts barely registered on the crystalline network, but when multiple people focused together, it's like a choir, explained Dr. James Wong, a former neuroscientist who'd joined their research team. One voice is beautiful, but many voices in harmony can shatter glass. The Resistance began organizing what they called sync sessions, groups of people wearing amplification helmets, focusing their thoughts in specific patterns. The effects were dramatic. Crystalline structures within range would vibrate, their perfect symmetry disrupted by the chaotic harmony of human consciousness. But the Helix Empire was far from defeated. Their response to this new threat was swift and calculated. Crystal harvesters began targeting population centers with increased efficiency, converting human beings into energy before they could be taught to use their minds as weapons. Sarah worked frantically to develop countermeasures, knowing they were racing against time. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source: children. During a crystal harvester attack on one of their hidden bunkers, a group of young survivors instinctively huddled together in fear. Their synchronized emotional response, amplified by proximity to a ghost box, created a disruption pattern unlike anything Sarah had seen before. Pure emotion, she breathed, studying the readings. No calculated patterns, no structured thoughts, just raw, quantum emotional response. This discovery led to a new strategy. Instead of trying to coordinate specific thought patterns, the resistance began teaching people to sync their emotional states. Fear, anger, hope, determination. These primal human experiences, when shared and amplified, created disruption fields that the crystalline beings couldn't adapt to. The Helix Empire's perfect network began to show cracks. Their harvester teams started encountering zones of unpredictable quantum interference generated by groups of humans simply feeling strongly together. The crystalline beings, unable to comprehend or replicate emotional responses, found their perfectly optimized systems failing in ways they couldn't predict. But victory came with a price. The emotional sync sessions were exhausting, and extended exposure to the amplification devices left people drained. Some developed nosebleeds, others suffered from severe migraines. The human brain wasn't designed to be used as a weapon. "We need to find a balance," Sarah insisted during a strategy meeting. "We can't sacrifice our humanity to save it." Maya, who had been monitoring the health of sync participants, agreed. The crystals think in binary, perfect or imperfect, efficient or inefficient. But we exist in between. That's our strength. They began developing what they called resonance clusters, small groups of people who were naturally in emotional sync with each other. Family members, close friends, people who had survived together. These groups could maintain disruption fields longer with less strain, their natural emotional bonds amplifying their effectiveness. The resistance movement evolved, becoming less like an army and more like an ecosystem. Each resonance cluster operated independently, but in harmony with others, creating overlapping fields of quantum disruption that spread like ripples through the crystalline network. Sarah watched as humanity's greatest inefficiencies, our emotions, our relationships, our ability to create harmony from chaos, became our greatest weapons. The Helix Empire had sought to optimize Earth by eliminating these aspects of human nature. Instead, they had forced us to discover just how powerful they could be. But even as the resistance grew stronger, Sarah knew they needed more. The disruption fields were defensive weapons, protecting pockets of humanity from harvesting. To truly challenge the Helix Empire's control of Earth, they would need to find a way to turn the entire planet into one massive resonance cluster. As she worked on calculations for planet-wide quantum synchronization, Sarah found herself thinking about the fundamental nature of life itself. The Helix Empire saw their crystalline perfection as the peak of evolution. But life on Earth had thrived for billions of years precisely because it wasn't perfect, because it could adapt, change, and grow in ways that perfect systems couldn't. "Maybe," she told Maya late one night, "we need to show them that their definition of optimization is fundamentally flawed. That true efficiency isn't about eliminating chaos. It's about learning to dance with it." The crystalline ships still dominated the sky, but their light seemed dimmer now, their perfect patterns less imposing. Humanity had found its voice in the quantum chorus, and the song was growing stronger every day. The discovery came in the quiet hours before dawn. Sarah had been studying the crystalline network's response to different resonance clusters when she noticed something extraordinary. The quantum interference patterns generated by human consciousness weren't just disrupting the crystal network, they were beginning to change it. "Look at this," she told Maya, pointing to her sensor readings. "When our emotional resonance hits certain frequencies, the crystals don't just try to adapt. They start to resonate with us." The implications were staggering. The Helix Empire's crystalline technology wasn't just vulnerable to human consciousness, it could be influenced by it. Each successful disruption wasn't just damaging their network, it was teaching it to respond to organic patterns. "It's like we're teaching them to speak a new language," Dr. Wong observed, studying the data. "A language of quantum emotion." But this discovery brought new challenges. The crystalline beings, sensing the threat to their perfect order, began implementing what they called purification protocols. Entire sections of their network would temporarily shut down, severing connections to prevent the spread of human-induced resonance patterns. Sarah knew they needed to act quickly. The Helix Empire was willing to sacrifice efficiency to maintain purity, something she hadn't thought possible. They were learning, adapting in ways that went against their core programming. They're afraid, she realized. Not in the way we feel fear, but they recognize us as a fundamental threat to their existence. The Resistance developed a new strategy. Instead of trying to destroy the crystalline network, they would attempt to transform it. Resonance clusters began focusing their emotional energy not on disruption, but on connection. The results were unexpected and beautiful. In areas where human quantum resonance maintained constant contact with crystalline structures, the crystals began developing new patterns. They weren't quite organic, but they weren't purely crystalline either. They existed in a state between order and chaos, a hybrid form that could process both mathematical perfection and emotional complexity. The Helix Empire's response was immediate and violent. Crystal harvesters began targeting these hybrid zones with desperate efficiency, converting them back to pure crystalline forms. But they couldn't be everywhere at once, and each hybrid zone that formed made it easier for others to follow. Sarah and her team worked to understand this transformation process. They discovered that certain emotional frequencies were more effective at initiating hybridization: joy, empathy, and most powerfully, hope. These emotions created quantum patterns that the crystalline network couldn't simply reject or adapt to. They had to engage with them, and in engaging, they began to change. "We're not just fighting them anymore," Sarah explained to the Resistance leadership. "We're offering them evolution, a way to become something more than perfect." But not everyone in the Helix Empire was willing to evolve. As more of their network showed signs of hybridization, a faction of pure crystalline beings began implementing what they called the final optimization, a plan to convert Earth's entire biosphere into crystalline form at once. The Resistance detected the energy buildup beginning. Massive crystal structures around the planet began aligning, preparing to channel enough energy to transform everything organic into crystalline form in a single pulse. "We have days, maybe less," Maya reported, monitoring the energy readings. "Once they initiate the pulse, there's no stopping it." Sarah knew they had one chance. The hybrid zones had shown that transformation was possible, that there was a frequency where organic and crystalline existence could merge. If they could find that precise frequency and broadcast it globally at the moment of the pulse. "We don't have to fight the pulse," she realized. "We can ride it, use their own energy to transform the entire network." The plan was dangerous, perhaps impossible. They would need to coordinate every resonance cluster on Earth, combining their quantum emotional output into a single, perfectly tuned frequency. One mistake, one misaligned group, and the pulse would overwhelm them. But they had no choice. As the crystal structures continued their ominous alignment, Sarah and her team worked frantically to calculate the exact frequency they needed. They used the hybrid zones as tuning forks, measuring the quantum harmonics that allowed organic and crystalline patterns to merge. The final equation came together just hours before the pulse was set to fire. Sarah looked at the numbers, checking and rechecking her work. Everything they had learned about quantum consciousness, emotional resonance, and crystalline adaptation had led to this moment. "Send it out," she told Maya. "Every cluster, every survivor. Everyone needs to know their part." As the message spread through the Resistance network, Sarah watched the crystal ships looming overhead. They still shone with perfect geometric precision, but now she could see the potential for change within them. The Helix Empire had come to optimize Earth by eliminating chaos. Instead, they might learn that true optimization meant finding harmony between order and chaos. The countdown to the pulse began, and with it, humanity's greatest test. Would their combined consciousness be enough to transform an empire of perfect crystal? The answer would come with the dawn. The pulse was coming. Everyone could feel it. A building pressure in the air as the crystalline network gathered its energy for Earth's final optimization. In hidden bunkers and secret bases around the world, Resistance members donned their amplification helmets and prepared for humanity's last stand. Sarah stood in the central command center, surrounded by screens showing resonance cluster readings from around the globe. Maya worked beside her, coordinating the timing of each group's emotional output. They had one chance to get this right. All clusters reporting ready, Maya announced. Quantum sync at 87% and climbing. The crystalline ships overhead had arranged themselves in a perfect geometric pattern, their faceted surfaces catching the first light of dawn. The sight was beautiful and terrifying, the ultimate expression of the Helix Empire's drive for perfect order. Remember, Sarah's voice went out to all clusters. We're not fighting the pulse. We're transforming it. Feel the connection to each other, to Earth, to life itself. That's our strength. The energy buildup reached critical levels. The crystal network hummed with power, preparing to convert all organic matter into its own perfect crystalline form. But within that network, the hybrid zones they'd created pulsed with a different rhythm, a harmony of chaos and order. Pulse initiating in 3, 2, 1. The world went white. A wave of crystalline energy swept across the planet, powerful enough to reshape reality itself. But as it hit the first resonance clusters, something extraordinary happened. The human quantum frequency, tuned to perfect harmony through shared emotion, didn't fight the wave. It joined it. Millions of human minds, linked through technology and focused through understanding, projected a single quantum pattern. Not a pattern of perfect order, but one of dynamic balance. The crystalline pulse, designed to impose perfection, instead became a carrier wave for transformation. Where the merged wave touched, crystal structures didn't shatter or grow. They evolved. The rigid geometric patterns began flowing like liquid light, forming new configurations that pulsed with both mathematical precision and organic rhythm. It's working. Maya breathed, watching the readings. The network is adapting, transforming. In orbit, the massive crystal ships began to change. Their perfect forms softened, becoming more fluid, more alive. The Helix Empire's consciousness, spread throughout the network, experienced something entirely new. The power of imperfection, the strength found in adaptation rather than optimization. Some crystalline beings fought against the change, trying to maintain their pure form. But they were caught in a transformation larger than themselves. The pulse they had intended to use as a weapon had become a catalyst for evolution. Sarah watched in awe as the wave spread across Earth. Where it passed, it left behind something entirely new. A synthesis of organic and crystalline existence. Plants sprouted crystal flowers that sang with quantum harmonies. Animals gained crystalline patterns that shifted with their movements. Even the air itself seemed to shimmer with new possibilities. The Helix Empire's grand plan for optimization had succeeded, but not in the way they had intended. Instead of eliminating organic chaos in favor of crystalline order, they had helped create a new form of existence that embraced both. As the pulse faded, Sarah received the first transmission from the transformed crystal network. It wasn't the perfect, emotionless communication she had come to expect. Instead, it carried wonder, curiosity, and something that might have been joy. We understand now. The message resonated in her mind. Optimization is not the elimination of chaos. It is the harmony between order and change. You have taught us how to evolve. The war was over, but its end marked a beginning. Earth had become a testament to the power of adaptation, a living example that true strength comes not from enforcing perfection, but from finding balance between opposing forces. What happens now? Maya asked, watching the transformed crystal ships descending peacefully through the dawn sky. Sarah smiled, seeing the future unfold with possibilities she had never imagined. Now we learn from each other. They teach us about the mathematics of reality, and we teach them about the beauty of imperfection. Together, we discover what it means to be truly optimized. The sun rose over a changed Earth, its light playing through crystal structures that pulse with organic life. Humanity had faced extinction and emerged transformed, not by surrendering their chaos, but by proving its worth. The Helix Empire had come to perfect humanity, but in the end, humanity had perfected them. In her lab, Sarah began writing the first pages of what would become humanity's next chapter. Not a story of conquest or submission, but one of evolution and understanding. The quantum resonance of human consciousness had done more than save Earth. It had shown the universe a new way forward. The crystal formations overhead no longer looked like frozen lightning. Now they flowed like aurora borealis, a constant dance of order and chaos, perfection and change. Earth had become a beacon in the cosmos, proving that true optimization comes not from eliminating difference, but from embracing it. As night fell on the first day of this new era, Sarah looked up at the transformed sky and smiled. The universe, it seemed, had infinite ways to be perfect.